and welcome to the program. I am DEJI360. After weeks of deliberations, the federal government has approved 5 billion naira each for each of the states of the country and the Federal Capital Territory to enable them to procure food items for distribution to the poor in their respective states as palliatives for citizens. Governor Babagana Zulum now of Borno State disclosed this at the Presidential Villa, Abuja, shortly after the National Economic Council meeting on Thursday. Now, that development comes in the wake of the hike in the cost of food items and petroleum owing to the removal of petrol subsidy. Now, the palliative would enable state governments to procure 1,000 or 100,000 bags of rice, 40,000 bags of maize and fertilizers to cushion the effect of food shortage across the country. In addition to the fund, Zulum said the federal government also released 5 trucks of rice each to the 36 states governors. Let's take a listen now to part of what the governor said.
This funding has to be shared with a formula as follows. 52% of this money is given to states as grants, while 48% of the 5 billion naira is to be paid back on an installment basis within a period of 2 years, 20 months to the CBN by the states and the local government areas in Nigeria. This fund has to be distributed to the following sectors: MSMEs, industrial sector, cash transfer, about 125 billion naira will go to cash transfer, agricultural sector, as well as gas expansion for buses. Because of the increasing cost of fossil fuel, the federal government has intended to establish more gas stations in Nigeria, procure more gas-powered buses, CNG buses, as well as electric buses in order to cushion the effect of the subsidy removal. The council has also tasked the state to dialogue with the labor unions leadership. A committee made up of Anambra State Governor, NGF Chairman, and others have been nominated to interface with labor. The most important thing that the council has taken note is that all these palliatives that are being mentioned now are temporary solutions. Council has decided to invest on medium and longer term sustainable solutions that will ensure availability of food and non-food items in Nigeria, especially investing in commercial agriculture and also investing in irrigated agriculture.
The governor of Borno State there, Babagana Zulum. Meanwhile, organized labor has knocked the federal government for releasing a 180 billion palliative package to states to cushion the impact of the fuel subsidy removal. Both the Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress insisted that the governors could not be trusted, noting that politicians and not the poor would benefit from the 5 billion largesse given to each state government for disbursement now to the poor. Well, joining me now on the program to discuss all of this, I have the lead director, Center for Social Justice, Eze Onyekpere, and also joining us is a developmental economist, Hawa Mustafa. Thank you very much for coming on the program. Let me start with you, Madam Mustafa. What do you make of the decision of the government now to give this money to the governors to administer?
I think first of all is to note the fact that government is realizing that it's governing people and not animals. So when you turn out a policy, there's always going to be a reaction to that policy. Particularly, the reaction would also be determined, by the extent of the positivity or the negativity of that policy. And I think suddenly government realizes that it took a policy without that is having generally, I mean, we are seeing the negative implication on the people, and that apart from the fact that it is having a negative implication on the lives and existence of the people, it is also threatening, the security and of even the government itself, the existence of the government itself. I mean, we have seen what happened in Kaduna recently, and then some of the reactions, by the workers and other members of
shouldn't
the
this
civil society
palliatives
around
be
the
able to
country.
cushion
So
the
the
effects of,
immediate reaction is that
some of these
government,
problems you have
this
talked about?
policy is therefore a reaction, to say that this policy, I mean, the policy of bringing out palliative is a reaction to pushing, the action or the reaction of the people against the policy of the government. So I think for me, first of all, is to say that at least government is having, government is realizing it's sensitive to people's action or to its reaction and the reaction of the people to its own action. That's the first thing for me there. And the second thing is to say that the fact that I think there's also some sort of listening. It is a different thing for us to also judge how well they are listening, whether what they are listening to or the action that they are using to listen to the people is the right action. The fact is that they are listening to the fact that people are angry, and people are saying that, look, that there are other alternative ways of doing certain things. So first of all, we come down from government that it wanted to give a 500 billion naira dollar palliative to a government that is now saying that, okay, we'll spread this 500 billion naira across different ways.
Now, okay, I'm going to come back to you, but
Okay,
let me come to you, Mr. Onyepori.
Okay,
do you think the labor unions are justified in their reaction so far, that the money should not have been given to the governors? I mean, one wonders, if you don't give the governors the money, who then should be given the money?
Thank you. Let me start by saying that from what organized labor says, I am 101% in support of their position, because giving money to the governors must be based on a foundation, must be based on concrete agreements. What are they doing with the money? Where is the register of the poorest of the poor that they will use to disburse the money, or they will use to disburse the rice or whatever?
But they say they have their own register.
Buying? No, if you recall, they tried to discredit the federal
that
register just a couple of weeks ago. When did they now make up a register in under 2 weeks or 3 weeks? What kind of procedure did they take to arrive at that register? What is likely going to happen is that the politicians are going to share this rice and this money among themselves and their cronies. And in some states that are going to have elections very soon, the federal government has given them good opportunity to use that to as things to buy voters and then distribute to those who are supporting them. So I don't see the empirical basis of how they are going to disburse that money. For instance, you give a state 100,000 bags of rice. How is it just one poor person or one poor family a bag? Or are they going to share it, 3 or 4 of them a bag? And how do you just make sure you are reaching everybody that needs to be reached, and not high-heel politicians going to benefit from the rice and the money and taking it home and leaving out the poor? So there is a critical challenge. There's no foundation to how this money is going to be deployed.
So in the alternative now, what do you think should have been done?
You see, that was the reason why initially some of us took the position that they don't need to throw away the baby with the bathwater. That initial register, if there were challenges with it, it should have been modified, okay, made more equitable, made more empirical, verifiable in terms of the names of the persons, they introduce more transparency and accountability, and possibly publish the names on a portal of those who claim that the poorest of the poor, because we are not publishing the account number, we are not publishing anything. But if you believe you are entitled to take money off my tax money, you're entitled to get a stipend or what, I should be able to know who you are. And those around your neighborhood should be able to verify if that person is so very poor. So I had expected them to make that register work as well, or in the alternative, the federal government should have invested in a very critical sector that we can all see. Our refineries are still down. Will the heavens fall if we rehabilitate the refineries with that money and everybody sees that maybe we've taken 100
But
naira out of
the rehabilitation
price
is
of fuel.
ongoing anyway, and we know we borrowed money for it.
No, that's the story. That's the story we've been hearing of since the Buhari's days. So the story is not new. You could see that since Tinubu took over, or since Buhari, the last days of Buhari, the power sector has become so abysmal. What happens if we strengthen power supply so that it becomes more stable and Nigerians are not made to pay more? Instead of saying increasing the tariffs, even if that's a subsidy, what happens in such a way that is empirical and everybody can feel the benefits?
Okay.
So these are the
yes.
ways that things could be done.
I get your point. Let me go to Mrs. Mustafa now. Madam, you look at the reaction of the labor unions, and then you think about what Mr. Onyekpere has said, that these state governors do not have their own social register. We know that they condemned the register of the federal government, and basically got the federal government now to give them this money. So what's your take on that? Do you think the federal government should have routed this money now through the state governors?
Well, first of all, I want us to clear the fact that the idea of palliative, theoretically speaking and practically speaking, is an idea that that sits within the context of social protection. And I think in that context, social protection as a means of reducing or alleviating poverty is a right thing. However, I think the whole idea of the cry or the quarrel the people have, including labor, with these palliatives is around transparency and accountability.
Yes.
It is not about the idea of doing something to reduce or assuage the poverty or the hardship of
that
the
is
people.
true.
But it is about how sincere are you. So I think in that context, we therefore need to look at those issues that are of concern, the issue of transparency, the issue of accountability. Where is the registrar of the poor? We hear that the National Social Security Agency somewhere has this information. Of course, even the question of the disputes with the state government, we know a lot of these are politics. We know that even in the past, experience has shown us that most of the things, poverty has become commercialized in the sense that when you say that you are alleviating poverty or you are doing something for the people, another person, another sector, or another class of people through that are really enriching themselves. And you don't see the lasting impact. So in that context, one, appreciates that sentiment around the quarrel, with the government, around the doubts about the sincerity of the government. It is not that the context of, the real content itself is bad, but that the way, the method, of even arriving at 180 billion naira, for instance, how did you arrive at that? What informed that? Whom do you have in mind? If you say 180 billion, for each state, the average number of poverty people, if you go by the statistics that say that about 133 million Nigerians are living in multidimensional poverty, you are talking of an average of maybe 20 million people, so to say, per state. You are talking about an average of 2 million to 3 million people, between 2 million and 3 million people per state. So how are you going to reach these people? Is this your target? Are you going to reach 1 million of these people? Are you going to use 2 million of these people?
But that's exactly the point.
When you talk about 100 bags of rice per state, again, to whom are you targeting the distribution of these 100 bags of rice? Where are they? How are you going to distribute it? Are you going to distribute by family head? Are you going to distribute by individuals? I think these are the whole issues that over which people need transparency and accountability. And that is why people don't trust the government, particularly the state government. Because in fact, most of the ills around issues of corruption, around issues of pulling the country backward in this country, a lot is happening at the state level. That sometimes we don't even focus on that in that regard. So people are scared that, look, this whole thing is going to be politicized. So the other question is, the government, what kind of committee or what kind of body do you have that is going to see to ensure the supervision of this distribution and make sure that whatever it is you have decided to distribute. Look, another thing is that let us not take certain things for granted in this country. There's real poverty. Poverty so much that, look, there is somebody that is so poor that if this person sees a cup of rice, a cup of rice in one day, it means a lot to that whole family. You know, so we need to understand that. But the most important thing is not even as small as we think, as we believe this palliative is, as small as we believe it is, considering the huge amount of resources and wealth, you know, that is in this country. Even as much as we underestimate this, the important thing is how transparent, you know, are we going to see in terms, what kind of transparency are we going to see? Who? And I agree with Eze Onyekere, where is the registration? Where is registrar? Before the distribution begins, can each state begin to give us publicly, you know, make anybody have access, make the public have access to the registration, to the book that registers the poor. Who are they? Where are they? Let anybody be free. Let labor, let civil society, let people be free to be able to access and verify the existence of these people, and not only the existence, but also the worthiness of these people to have, you know, to be able to get access those facilities.
I'm going to come back to you, madam.
That when you are also distributing these facilities, it actually gets to those that is actually meant to get to.
I'm going to come back to you. Let me go back to Mr. Onyekere. Mr. Onyekere, let's just assume that, look, these governors administer these funds, you know, transparently. Let's just take it for granted now, even though we know it's a challenge, that they administer the funds transparently. What impact do you think 5 billion naira would make in each of these states? Because, I mean, you look at it, for some of these states, they are small. And, you know, even 2 billion naira could make an impact in their state. So, but generally speaking now, if the funds were administered, you know, transparently, what are the impacts we could see?
Well, unless you are going to share the money out, and at the end of the day, every citizen, particularly the poor, could get a relatively small amount of money. So I do not expect much impact. If you are even to share the rice among the poor, the maize, they could eat it for 3, 4, 5 days, maximum 1 week, and it is finished, and everything is back to square one. So that's why I was thinking out a proper design of an intervention program with clear milestones and deliverables, not for us to be at this point in time thinking about what is it going to achieve. Before the money should have been disbursed, we should have set the targets of what we want to achieve. And that's why I'm thinking more of a public expenditure model that will impact on virtually everybody. Because if you give somebody, like say 5 or 10,000, and then in 1 week or 2 weeks, he uses it to feed himself or take a child to the hospital, and then we are back to square one. And so some of us have suggested, like in the area of health, we had wanted some citizens, the poorest of the poor, subscription to health insurance for 1 year for them, so that if they are sick or their children or their family, that one will be taken care of. And then you can also talk of, even if it is this food, you focus more on not just giving people food, but on helping the farmers to be able to plant more hectares of land, to have access to more seeds, more fertilizers, and more, maybe the chemicals they need to make sure that they get a bumper harvest. So you strategize, even if it means for each state finding a way to stabilize their electricity by, let's say, if you used to have 10 hours of electricity every day, adding 2 or 3 more hours a day, to the knowledge of everybody, it will make the state become more productive. Or even if you are not going to inflate the contract, target 3 or 4 roads, maybe over a space of 100 to 200 kilometers, and make them more motorable. This will be a better way.
But don't you think the government? Don't you think the government's thinking is that, and which is rightly so, that people are actually hungry, and you look at food inflation in the country today, it's over 26%, and the truth is that people are hungry.
Yes, people are hungry, but what is the root cause of the inflation? You have to tackle it and not simply giving them food to eat now, and in the evening they come back to you. In many parts of Nigeria, farmers have not been able to farm because of the the farmers' herders crisis or the insurgency and the crime activities of criminals. Tackle it at that level. Even if you were to introduce more food temporarily into the market, it's not going to bring down the price of food. So that's why all these sustainable interventions that we are thinking of, CNG buses, even if they have to be subsidized, some form of subsidy has to come into the transport arena, so that in the long run, people begin to feel this impact. Yes, you can feed somebody in the next 1 week. After 1 week, what happens? Food inflation, make sure you tackle the root, particularly insurgency in these food baskets. And then think of other more structured ways of intervening. You know, we have inflation, pumping in more money into the economy without increasing available goods and services. What exactly are we trying to achieve? At the end of the day, we may end up, after putting this money, having inflation notch up a little bit higher. So as far as I'm concerned, there must be a structured way, and not simply asking every governor to go back to his whims and caprices, because you know, at the state level, the houses of assembly are very weak. That is the agency that's supposed to have oversight and hold them accountable. The civil society is also weak, and many governors there have started this idea of using criminal defamation law to hunt down their opponents in Imo State, in so many states of the Federation. So who is going to actually talk to the governor or call him to order? Because in this sense, House of Assembly can't do their job. You talk, the DSS or the police come after you, charge you that you are defaming his character, bring criminal charges, detain the person. So there is really no hope.
And where is the role of the local government in this distribution chain? Because the local governments are supposed to be involved anyway.
The states have subsumed the local governments. There is no proper local government elections. The chairmen are more or less selected by the state governor. So the people at the grassroots have lost their voice. Everything is command and control from the state capital. That is even the danger, because if we have properly elected local government councils, and you say you donate, you give 10,000 bags of rice to a state, we can now sit down and say, how many local governments are there? What is the population of each local government? And you now share out the rice. And people can reach their chairman or councillors to say, we understand that 200 bags of rice was brought to our local government. How did you share it? But how dare you? Who will go to the state capital and have access to the governor to begin to ask him about the thousands of bags of rice? It will just simply be audio rice. The money will be audio money. I'm insisting the governors are not in a position to get it right, because there's no empirical basis, and the antecedents doesn't show anything. They care for anybody. They only care for themselves and their cronies.
Mrs. Mustafa, what's your take on this?
Yes, much as I agree, we also need to, we need to, moving forward in this country, reduce the way we also, blame our governors or the government and condemn them. Government must be made to work.
Yes.
We must begin to organize and insist that they do the right thing. They are not doing the right thing. They are there for the people. If you are not ready to work for the people, then get out of the way. So once you are there as a governor, as a chairperson, the people must ensure that you are transparent, that you do the right thing, because that is your responsibility. The primary responsibility of government is the welfare of its people. At this very moment, a government, whether at the federal level, the state level, or the local government level, is unable to carry out this basic responsibility, this very fundamental responsibility, then you have no business being there. So for me, moving forward, we must organize, and this organizing must be led by the trade unions, the labor, and the civil society, to make sure that whatever it is, as little as it may be, that the government has decided to share to the people, must have the people participating in how it is being shared. Not any government alone, not politicians influencing, but the people. We know where the people are. We know whom the people can trust. We know whom the people can reach. So at every level, both the state level, government level, community level, and of course we know these things, there has to be that kind of transparency. But again, you see, DEJI, going forward, I think we need to also look for a more fundamental response to the persistent state of poverty in this country. We don't always need to wait until there is one sudden problem and then we are looking for one sudden response whose impact is not going to make any fundamental change in the situation of poverty or in the lives of the poor. And what I mean by this is that we have to go, because I even look at this pandemic, is it going to be, it's apparently a once-off activity, a once-off intervention. And like Eze said, what happens thereafter? Would you have had any major impact that changes the lives of the people? Or would you have succeeded in putting chocolates in the mouth of a child who has never tasted sweet before and leave the child yearning for more and probably looking for other avenues to ensure that some way, somehow, they get what they have tasted that they never imagined was going to come to them in such a way? So I think we need to have, going beyond this, the government needs to look, because for me, it's not just enough to give cash and food palliatives. It is like giving somebody a fish. We need to learn to give other facilities that will cushion, that will have a more lasting impact. And so the issue of health, the issue of education, because when you give people money, what really do people do with the money apart from food? And if they eat once, do they just eat for 1 week and that's the end of the day? What do you do to ensure that they have access to food, nutritious food, consistently and not a one-off thing? What do we do to ensure that other things they may use money for, medicals, health, that they have access to affordable and, good health service, for the poor and in all the communities? What are you going to do to ensure that? Because even when you are able to eat well or when you don't eat well, the tendency is for you to fall sick more. And if you fall sick more, the tendency is for you to also want to, access medical facilities, whichever way you are able to access it. So these things go together. It's not just food. It's about health. What is the government going to do to ensure that people are able to access health? What is government going to do to ensure that housing, decent housing, is available to both the poor and the working class in both the rural and the urban communities? What is the government?
Madam, let me pause you here. I'm still going to come back to you, but we just have to wrap up because time is actually not on our side. Let me get a final word from Mr. Onyekwere. Mr. Onyekwere, the people themselves, I mean, this money has been distributed anyway, so and the government has chosen to take this route. So, but the fact is, the people themselves would have a role to play in ensuring that this money actually get to them. So what should they do? Do they just have to sit down and wait? Because you would expect that by now, going forward, they should be asking their governors and local government chairmen questions.
Well, I think the way forward is for organized labor, civil society, and the media to engage the governors, because it's not a question for local government chairmen. The local government people are not in the picture. For them to announce to the states on what exactly they intend to use the money for. And they could as well open an electronic portal where they could be giving account of how they're spending this money. And this kind of account should be verifiable and people can track and report on it on their own. And then let them get the legislature involved, as well as also focusing on whether the benefits will accrue to high officials of the state, the commissioners, the legislators, the permanent secretaries, or whether this is a sum of money and resources that will eventually be distributed to the poorest of the poor. So I don't want NLC and TUC to simply wave it off and say no. They should set up their committees to meet the governors and say, okay, we're in Owerri, we're in Imo State, we're in Kaduna, we're in Zaria. Please tell us what you want to do, and we want to track how this is done. I think that's the way forward. That's
a fantastic idea. Ms. Mustafa, so what do you think people, especially at the state level now, should begin to do, to ensure that their governors spend this money for what the money is meant?
Yes, like I said, which I also concur with Izzy, the people must take charge. And then you see, sometimes again, we should not underestimate the power of the people, even the power of their action, the power of their voices. But then the people will also require, a force, a lead to get them into action. And that lead is where we think that I believe that the trade unions will be able to play a very good role. The civil society, I see community-based organizations as well. They are everywhere. And, traditionally, we have a way of relating with the people, of linking up with the people. There are so many things that are being done in this country that you don't say you cannot reach the people. You don't say the people cannot find a way to react. Even the House of Assemblies, all the politicians, they have a stake one way or the other in the communities. If they don't have homes, they have family members. We should, make sure that people are organized and properly mobilized to ask questions, to take control. If these resources have been given to the government, we must ensure that the government does not start distribution until a proper format of distribution that includes the right people is put together before that distribution takes place. And I also agree that transparency also includes that let us know who has benefited what from where. If people don't, many people today have access to telephone so that you can verify. People, you can locate them through communities, through community leaders, through religious leaders. You can verify some of this information. Then what is important is, please, the government should not for any reason, leave the distribution of these palliatives in the hands of governors, in the hands of politicians, whether at the state level or at the government level, without including the civil society who are known with good reputation, not just any, and of course the trade unions who have presence in all the local government areas of the country. Thank you.
I want to thank you both for coming on the program. Thank you so very much for your time. And the truth is that even the media has a very important role to play in this. So the media has a lot to do. Other than civil society groups, the media, of course, has a lot to do. And on our own part, we'll try as much as possible to monitor this distribution and monitor the way these monies are spent. And let's just hope the governors, too, would lead by, showing the way and come out. I'm waiting for the first governor who would come out to, put these figures out there and say, look, this is what we intend to do, and then put everything out there in the public so that everybody can see. But there's no question at all that the media has a lot to do in this case. Thank you both for coming on the program. Eze Onyekpore, the lead director, Center for Social Justice, thank you very much for your time. And Hawa Mustafa, a developmental economist, thank you both for coming on the program. We'll take a short break now, but when we come back, ministers get portfolios. So that's what we'll be talking about next. Stay with us, don't go away.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the president of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.